Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amber Rose, and if you're new here, every single Monday I make a new Jane or John Doe case, starting with the state of Alabama and ending with the state of Wyoming. So today we are going to be talking about not one, but two different Jane Doe cases from the state of Alaska, both of which are actually the only two current unidentified women in the state of Alaska. But as you'll come to find out in a minute, one of them has actually been identified while I was doing my research. Within like the 2-week span that I was researching this case, one of them has been identified, so we will go over that in a minute. But without further ado, let's just get started. Now, I do want to put a trigger warning in here that this case does depict themes of extreme violence, sexual assault, rape, and just overall severe trauma. So if any of those things are something that you are uncomfortable with or something that is going to trigger you, please click off this video. There will be other ones in the future for you to view. Now, the reason that I chose to do two Jane Does today is because, as I had previously stated, in the state of Alaska, there are currently only two Jane Does listed. And while I was doing my research, I came to find out that both of these Jane Does, their murders have been solved and were carried out by the same person, which would be the serial killer Robert Hansen. I could honestly make an entire video about Robert Hansen himself. He is a vile, disgusting man, and the acts that he carried out on all of these women are undescribable and, quite frankly, just one of the worst cases I've ever heard. I'm going to briefly cover his case just to give more context on our case, but if you want any more information about his case, there are plenty of videos out there. One that I personally really liked, is I've heard this case multiple times, but Savannah Brimer, she does true crime videos and she has a podcast. She covered this case about 3 weeks ago and did an incredible job, so I will have that linked down below. You can listen to it in podcast form or on YouTube. So if you want more information about Robert Hansen himself and about his crimes and his upbringing, then you can go click over to her video. But I want to focus specifically on these two Jane Doe cases. Both of these Jane Does have other names besides just Jane Doe. One of them is dubbed Horseshoe Harriet, and the other one is dubbed Eklutna Annie, and I apologize if I'm butchering that, but you'll figure out in a minute why both of them have these names. And both of these women are thought to be victims of serial killer Robert Hansen, as I had previously stated. Now, because Robert Hansen's backstory is going to come into play while I cover these two unidentified victims / one unidentified victim, I do want to just briefly go over his case and then we can move on, because he has had way more than enough coverage and this video is not about him. It is about these two Jane Does. Robert Hansen is known as the Butcher Baker. His crimes took place between the years of 1970 and 1980. It's really not confirmed exactly how many women he killed or how long this killing spree lasted, but it was between the 70s and the 80s. When he was caught in 2014 and convicted, he did confess to 17 women. 12 of those women have been found, although he was only convicted of 4 of them, one of them being Eklutna Annie, one of these Jane Does. As of today, I want to say that 2 of them are still unidentified, but actually now only 1 of them are unidentified. He claimed that Eklutna Annie was his first victim, although he provided a map of where he had killed and buried these 17 women, and there were 3 women that were found on this map who he says he didn't kill but were in the exact spots that he had marked on this map. But he was sentenced to 461 years for the 4 murders that he was convicted of. But unfortunately, he did die in prison already, so he basically got away with everything that he did. It is theorized that there are more than the 17 that he did confess to. Now, he would mainly go after prostitutes and strippers and just women who, in his words, wouldn't be missed. One thing to note about Robert Hansen is that he was a very skilled hunter and archerist, and in the state of Alaska, he actually held hunting records until they were later revoked due to this case and his horrific crimes. In 1967, he moved to Anchorage, Alaska with his second wife, Darla. He had been previously convicted and served jail time for petty crimes such as theft and just overall violence. He set a school bus on fire at one point, and he wanted a fresh start. So he literally moved as far away from his old life as he possibly could to Alaska. And he did have a family at this point too. Growing up, he was considered an outcast. He was socially awkward, and as he described it, he was constantly bullied by his peers and rejected by any woman in his life, which definitely comes into play to what happened not only in this case, but to our two Jane Does. Now, in terms of this specific killing spree that we are talking about that did involve both of our Jane Does, he would kidnap these women, sexually assault and rape them, torture them, sometimes for days at a time, and then he would load them into his plane. Yes, he had a private plane that he owned by himself. He would load them into his plane, say that he was going to set them free. He would fly them out into the absolute middle of nowhere, tell them to run, and then just for his own sick pleasure, he would go out and hunt them. So these poor women, after surviving a horrific ordeal, think that they're finally gonna get away and live, and then this sick bastard would hunt them down. He would shoot them, he would stab them, or he would shoot them with a bow and arrow. It was kind of whatever he felt like that day. And I'm pretty sure there has been a movie made about this, but it just seems unimaginable that a human could be capable of that much deceit and destruction and horrific feelings towards women and have no problem just like going back to his normal life after he did this. And as I had stated earlier, he did have a map for which after he would kill, he would put an X on this map. He could like keep trophies and keep a record of where he had hunted down all of these women. So when he did confess and was caught, he handed the map over and was like, yeah, there they are, go find them. Like, I'm sorry, what? So anyway, like I said, Eklutna Annie, she is our first Jane Doe that we're going to talk about, and she is the woman that Robert Hansen claims to be his first victim, although again, we will never know if this is actually true, but let's start off with her story. Her body was discovered on July 17th of 1980, although one source did say July 27th, but I'm going to stick with July 17th because that is what almost every other source stated. Anyway, she was found in Eklutna, Alaska, which is why she's known as Eklutna Annie, and her body was discovered by building workers on the side of a roadway, like by power lines, in a shallow grave. She was buried near a heavily wooded area 1 mile south of Eklutna by mile marker post 2, but unfortunately by the time that her body was discovered, most of her remains had been eaten by animals, and it was mostly just skeletal remains and very loose soft tissue. Her estimated time of death was 1979 to 1980, so it could have been a couple of months, it could have been a year, but she was classified as homicide by stabbing. Now, when she was found, her physical description is as follows. They theorized she was a white female, but possibly mixed with Native American, approximately aged 16 to 25. So again, a larger age range, but she was definitely a younger woman. They estimated her height to be 4'11 to 5'3, but again, because of the state of her remains, they couldn't estimate her weight, and her height was definitely unsure. She had light brown hair that was longer with a reddish tint. She did have her ears pierced. Overall, they said that she was a smaller woman, like her build and just how she was when she was alive, shorter, tinier, smaller woman. At the time of her discovery, the clothing that she was wearing were red or reddish brown, high-heeled, thigh-high boots that were with vinyl material and did have a zipper going up the side of them. She was wearing jeans and a light-colored cardigan, either white, cream, or possibly a grayish blue. She had on a brown leather jacket that was hip-length, a wide metal bracelet that had floral stamps on it and 3 turquoise stones, a brown and turquoise shell necklace that had a heart pendant and twisted metal details on it, gold-plated twisted hoop earrings, a white shell ring with a brown circular design on top of it, and a gold-plated ladies chain link wristwatch by the brand Timex. And this watch had a brown face with white hands. They also found Salem brand matches in her pocket as well. Due to the state of her remains when she was found, there was no possibility of getting fingerprints or dental records, but as of now, they do have an active DNA profile for her, which is incredible because that is going to be the link that solves this case. Now, there was a theory put forward that she might have been in foster care or might have been a runaway, but according to Hansen, she was a topless dancer or some type of prostitute. He picked her up and kidnapped her, and the reason why he decided to kill her was because she tried to escape. And that's really all he had to say about it. He didn't know her name, didn't know anything about her. He was very nonchalant about the whole thing. She had no identification on her when she was found, although police did theorize that she was possibly from California or Washington before she ended up in the state of Alaska. Hansen loosely stated in one of his interviews that she had mentioned she was from Kodiak, Alaska, or she had family there, but obviously this has never been confirmed. She was added to NamUs on May 1st of 2012 and added to the DOE network prior to 2005, although the latest update on her case on the DOE network states that it was September 10th of 2020, so just over a year ago, and I will tell you what that is in just a minute. Now, aside from NamUs and the DOE network, she does have a profile on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and as well on the National Crime Information Center. I will put all 4 of these case file numbers up on the screen for you guys. Now, so far there have been 15 official rule outs of who they thought she was but have been confirmed to not be, and there also are additional ones that have yet to be ruled out. But it's important to keep in mind because they do have a full DNA profile of her. Her DNA is in a national database that is constantly checking and comparing profiles to who she is. So honestly, there's probably hundreds of more rule outs and hundreds of more that they have yet to test, but these are just the ones that have been currently confirmed as not to be her. Now, from the state of Alaska, the rule outs that they have confirmed so far are Megan Emmerich, Karen Evan, Andrea Altery, Renee Wade, and Roxanne Eastland. Now, Roxanne Eastland is also thought to have been a Robert Hansen victim herself, and she was the strongest lead they had in who they thought Eklutna Annie was, but unfortunately the DNA profile did not match. Roxanne Eastland went missing from Alaska on July 28th of 1980. Her body still has never been found, although Robert Hansen did confess to her murder, which is why she's thought to have been one of his victims. From California, the rule outs that they've made so far are Peggy Reed and Sherry Roach. And from the state of Washington, the rule outs they've made so far are Teresa Davis, Linda Adams, and Lori Partridge. Now, there's also been a couple miscellaneous states and women that aren't related to any of the previous states that they have thought to be her, so I'll go ahead and cover those right now as well. Now, from the state of Arizona, there was a woman named Aleka Manning who web sleuths thought might be her due to her likeliness of appearance and how she looked being compared to that of Eklutna Annie, but DNA did rule out that this was not her. From the state of Delaware, Ann Manchester has been ruled out. From Minnesota, Belinda Van Lythe has been ruled out. From Maryland, Simone Ridlinger has been ruled out. And from Ohio, Joanne Jenkins has been ruled out. Now, moving forward, there is a list of women who are currently being investigated to possibly be her, but have yet to be ruled out. So from Ohio, there's a woman named Brenda Sue Black. She went missing in the early 1980s and does have ties to the state of California, but she also was thought to have been the Riverside County Jane Doe as well. Unfortunately, she is still missing, and we do not have confirmation if she is the Riverside County Jane Doe or if she is Eklutna Annie Jane Doe or if she's neither of these women. A woman named Julie Soraka went missing from California in the late 1970s. Unfortunately, she was not reported missing for 40 years until 2019, but she was also in foster care when she went missing, which is one of the theories that surrounds our Jane Doe. There's a woman named Lucy Galinas who went missing from Quebec, Canada in 1973. Now again, due to her likeliness to our Eklutna Annie Jane Doe, that is why some theorize that she possibly is Eklutna Annie. And it's also important to remember that geographically, Alaska and Canada are much closer together than say Alaska and California. So I mean, that could also be a possibility. There was a woman named Elaine Robertson who went missing from Tacoma, Washington, but she also had ties to San Luis Obispo in California. Now, at the time of her disappearance, she was with her dog and had her car with her. Although her car was recovered, her and her dog have never been found or seen again. So I think that this one is kind of a far stretch just because she had no ties to the state of Alaska. She went missing from California and she went missing with her dog. I believe she was in a national forest, but again, to this day, neither her nor her dog have ever been found. And last, we have a woman by the name of Kimberly Cozart. She went missing from Julian, California in February of 1977, although she was not reported missing until December 15th of that year, which coincidentally was exactly 2 years to the date that her mother went missing on December 15th of 1975. Now, there is no information linking these two cases together. There are theories that they are, but it is just a coincidence that both her and her mother went missing 2 years apart and were reported exactly the same day, December 15th. She also might have used the last name Harper, but what links her possibly to Eklutna Annie is there is a photo of her online where she is wearing jewelry that was similar to the jewelry found on Eklutna Annie when her remains were discovered. A woman who advocated for the search of Eklutna Annie and advocates significantly for Jane and John Doe's, specifically of Native American descent, quoted saying, "Identifying her means that no matter how you lived, whatever circumstances that you are in, and that even after death, there is equality here." And I think this quote is so important, not only towards this case, but for every Jane and John Doe case, because these people just deserve to have their names back. It doesn't matter how they were killed, who killed them, why they ended up where they did, what their life was like before they died. They deserve to have their name back, and their family deserves to know what happened to them and where they are, which is why I have such a passion for Jane and John Doe cases. For whatever reason, this case specifically I feel so drawn to, just because I feel like Robert Hansen, her killer, has had so much coverage for so many years, and it's just like, I'm sick of hearing about him. We know what he did, we know he was a sick individual, but we need to know what happened to this woman and what her name is. We need to start talking about his victims that haven't been found, about his victims who don't have a name, because we get it, we know his story. He was a sick, vile human, but these women that he harmed deserve to have their lives back and deserve to have their stories told and deserve to have their names. So that's my take on that. As I stated earlier in the video, currently her DNA is being used for genetic genealogy and is actively being used in a national database with DNA. So I am very hopeful and confident that within the next year, or maybe even sooner than that, we will be able to identify Eklutna Annie Jane Doe. Randy McFerrin said that these types of processes can take up to a year to be complete if done right. But as we're about to discover in our next case for Horseshoe Harriet, everyone is hopeful that because her case panned out in the exact way that we all wanted it to, that so can Eklutna Annie's. If you know any information regarding the identity of Eklutna Annie, I will have all of her information listed on the screen as well as in the down bar below of who to contact and what agency if you know any information. Okay, so our next Jane Doe that we're going to talk about is Horseshoe Harriet. And as I stated at the very beginning of this video, as I was currently researching this case, her identity has been found, which is the best news in the entire world. And now obviously this video didn't help contribute to that in the slightest because she was identified on October 22nd of this year. But like, that's why I make these cases, because there's no better feeling than giving someone back their identity. So I am going to put a clip in here of me finding out who she was, because I recorded that because I was just in complete shock. But basically before I do that, what was happening was that I was pulling up my sources from the last couple of weeks, as I save obviously every source that I come across. And as I was pulling up these sources, half of them were saying page not found. And I was like, what do you mean page not found? So I went to her Doe Network profile, and the very top of the screen in like bold purple letters, it just said identified, but it didn't say who she was, when she was identified, anything like that. I clicked her name as profile, and her name as profile has already been deleted. So I was like, this isn't a joke, like she has been identified. And sure enough, I googled it, and there are a plethora of news articles and information explaining who she was and who she is and what her story is. So I'm gonna go and play that footage for you guys right now. You guys, I don't know if you can tell by the state of my face, but I'm like literally on the verge of tears right now. I'm so unbelievably and incredibly happy right now. I'm in shock. I literally can't believe this. I'm finishing up the research for the case that you're watching right now. And when I started researching this case a couple weeks ago, there were only 2 Jane Does listed in the state of Alaska, both of which, as you know from watching this video, are victims of Robert Hansen, who was a serial killer. On October 22nd, so literally just over a week ago, after 37 years, Horseshoe Harriet was identified. She does have her name back, and you're gonna find out in just a second who she is and all of that. But I'm like literally on the verge of tears because this is literally why I do what I do and why I make these videos, because I want so desperately to give these people their identities back. It's pretty crazy that I've been researching this case and she's now been identified through the week that I've been researching. So you can tell I'm like so flushed and just like so emotional right now. Oh my god, she has been identified. So let's just keep on with the video. As you saw, I was very excited and very emotional. I was literally tearing up. But after 37 years, we can confirm that Horseshoe Harriet, our Jane Doe, is identified as that of 19-year-old Robin Pelkey. Her case was solved on October 22nd of 2021. Like I had mentioned just a few minutes ago in our Eklutna Annie case, Horseshoe Harriet was identified using genetic genealogy. The crazy part about Robin Pelkey's case is that she was actually born and from Colorado, which is my home state. Denver News Channel did a huge segment on this. There's not much information regarding her family, her upbringing, how she ended up in Alaska, anything like that. And at this time, her parents are asking for privacy as they grieve with this news. But what is interesting to note is that she was not ever listed or reported as a missing person, and her family has yet to comment on this. I'm not going to speculate because personally I think her family is going through enough grief right now, finding out 37 years later that their daughter was a victim of serial killer Robert Hansen. But at least they know her final resting site, they know where she is, they know what happened to her, and they can finally get that closure that they need. I do just want to go over her story because even though she has been identified, I think it's important just to kind of go over why for 37 years she was considered a Jane Doe and how she got the name Horseshoe Harriet. Robin Pelkey was 19 years old when she went missing. She was living in Anchorage, Alaska at the time of her disappearance, and she was working as a sex worker, and unfortunately at this time she was also homeless. Hansen confessed that in the early 1980s, he kidnapped her, did his thing, loaded her into his plane, flew her to Horseshoe Lake, set her free, hunted her down, and then discarded of her body, which is why she was dubbed Horseshoe Harriet. She was discovered on April 25th, 1984 in Palmer, Matanuska Borough in Alaska. She was also dubbed Palmer Doe at one point, but for the most part, she is known as Horseshoe Harriet, was known as Horseshoe Harriet. Now we know she's Robin Pelkey. Her death was classified as a homicide by stabbing and gunshot, but at the time that her remains were discovered, she was merely just a skeleton. Now, they were able to obtain dental records, but for obvious reasons, they were not able to obtain a fingerprint from her. They estimated that she was a female aged 17 to 21. She had brown hair and she was possibly a smoker, but that was really all the information that they could come up with about her. And as we know now, she was 19 years old, so they were pretty spot on with the age estimation. When she was found, she was wearing a wool scarf, a knit coat and a sweater, blue jeans, wool socks, leg warmers, a nylon bra, and tennis shoes. She had on 4 gold-colored rings, and on her Doe Network profile, the only image that shows up regarding her case are actual evidence photos of these 4 rings. They also found on her cool cigarettes, condoms, a compact comb, and a large comb as well. She was buried in a cemetery in Anchorage, Alaska with a tombstone that read Jane Doe number 3, April 24th of 1984, which was incorrectly labeled as she was found on April 25th. Her remains were exhumed for further testing in September of 2014, right after Robert Hansen was caught and confessed to these murders. And although they were not able to obtain a facial recognition image from this, they were able to obtain a full DNA profile, which 7 years later was able to identify her as 19-year-old Robin Pelkey. As I said, she was born in Colorado in 1963, although a relative in Arkansas was the one who set forth their DNA to confirm that this was the body of Robin Pelkey that had been found 37 years ago. Now, one thing I was not able to figure out, which I am a little bit confused but mostly just curious about, is that if her tombstone was Jane Doe number 3, who was the other Jane Doe? We do know that there is a current Jane Doe, Eklutna Annie, but there's only one Jane Doe listed in the state of Alaska. So if she's number 3 and we know another one, who is the final Jane Doe? Because obviously at this point they've been discovered if there's only one Jane Doe listed for the state of Alaska. That's not really important to this case, but I've been thinking about that nonstop since I realized that she was buried as Jane Doe number 3 and I could only find 2 Jane Does for the state of Alaska. That is now only one Jane Doe. The most current update I have been able to find in this case is that the Department of Public Safety has purchased a new gravestone for Robin Pelkey. She is buried in Anchorage Memorial Park Cemetery in Anchorage, Alaska. And as of now, that is all of the information I have regarding Robin Pelkey, our second Jane Doe. I know that was a long video, and for all of you that stuck with me through it, thank you. This has definitely been the most heartwarming and exciting video I've covered for Missing Monday. I was absolutely not expecting to give news that one of our Jane Does has been identified, but like I said, it is best case scenario, so hopefully in the coming months we will know who Eklutna Annie is. If you're enjoying these videos, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment down below. And if your state is coming up or you have any recommendations for a Jane or John Doe case that you want me to cover, please leave them in the down bar below. I'm very interested and I would love to take your guys' suggestions in getting these people's cases out there. But that is all I have for you guys today, and I will see you next week with an all new Missing Monday. Bye.